Hello everyone, my name is Tundile and you are welcome to the Africa History Channel. Finally, we are the last episode in the 1851 Bombardment of Lagos series. 6 episodes, you've made it with us. Thank you for coming on the journey with us and we are glad that we have you here. To celebrate this episode and getting to the end of this, our first long series, I'm giving away a copy of Afonja the Fall. All you need to do is drop a comment on something new, something you didn't know before that you learned from this episode, and we'll select randomly at this time one of the comments to send the book to. It will be a signed copy, so just comment. Thank you very much. Now we'll start the episode, and make sure you stay tuned to the end of the episode to know what we are doing next. We have this really amazing, interesting new series that we're starting next week. So don't go away, get to the end of the video, and don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you very much. Let's get started. In January 1851, John Beecroft, the British consul for the Bights of Benin and Biafra, the now preferred name the Europeans used for the area they used to call the Slave Coast, visited the exiled Oba Akitoye in Badagry. This was against the backdrop of years of advocacy that came from 3 sources to the British Parliament. The first of these were the new commercial class emerging along the slave ports, the palm oil merchants, who were selling this commodity that had come into high demand in Europe for hygiene, soap making, and to lubricate the machines that powered the European industry after the Industrial Revolution. The second came from the Egba of Abeokuta, who had seen an influx of 2 sets of people over the decade leading up to 1851. The Saros, many of them Egba, from the destruction of the Egba forests, as well as the Oyo from the collapse of the Oyo Empire, who had been sold into slavery and freed into Sierra Leone, were now returning home. Many were settling in Abeokuta. With them came missionaries, sometimes referred to as Claphams, via Badagry and up the Ogun River. Some of these Saros went into clergy themselves, working with the European missionaries to set up missions in the town and surrounding areas. None was more influential at this time than Samuel Ajayi Crowther, who had first come to set up in 1841 and then returned in 1843. Others provided new strength to Abeokuta's defense, and many still became involved in commerce, growing in influence not only in Abeokuta but in Badagry and in Lagos. The most active of these missionary institutions were the Anglicans of the Church Missionary Society, CMS, which Crowther was a part of. They had a powerful leader based in London, Henry Venn, who had the ear of the Queen, as well as Lord Palmerston, the then Foreign Secretary, who would go on to be the British Prime Minister at 2 different times. This Saro continually saw Lagos, where many of them or their parents were initially sold into slavery, and where the ongoing slave trade negatively impacted their commerce, as needing British intervention to end this trade. A third interest was at play. While on exile, Akitoye continued to gather support to retake the throne from his nephew Kosoko, along with Efunroye Tinubu, who had been based in Abeokuta amongst the Egba herself. They aligned their interest of retaking the throne with those of the Abeokuta Egba and the Saro missionary interests of ending the slave trade in Lagos, and began to present Akitoye as the anti-slavery Oba candidate that much of history records him as. This is in spite of the record of his relationship with slave traders like Domingo Martinez and Efunroye Tinubu, an ongoing slave trade from Badagry even while he controlled the town. However, since the interest aligned, Beecroft's assessment of Akitoye after his own visits, in his own words, were, "The ex-Oba is a quite prudent man." On this visit, Akitoye presented Consul Beecroft with a formal request for protection, written by the CMS agent in Badagry on his behalf, Charles Goma. While we cannot be certain, about the subjective perception of the ex-Oba as he did not document them. It is likely that Akitoye may not have seen this as an invitation for the British to take over Lagos, or that it would end in such an overwhelming defeat of Lagos defenders. We will remember that 26 years earlier, and this must have been on Akitoye's mind, Akitoye's elder brother Adele had enlisted British help to do exactly what he was asking, and it ended in a defeat for Adele and his British allies. So victory for the British was not guaranteed. Upon receiving his request, Beecroft forwarded it to the Foreign Office under Lord Palmerston on February 20, 1851, and then followed up with a second, rather wild dispatch recommending that an attack be mounted on Lagos from Badagry on February 21st. Palmerston would write back after the events we shall discuss further along in the episode, authorizing Beecroft to conclude a treaty for the abolition of slave trade with the ruler of Lagos. But by not naming Kosoko, Palmerston was communicating to Beecroft that it did not have to be Kosoko who sat on the throne. In the same response, Palmerston asked Beecroft to tell Kosoko, if he refused to sign the treaty when offered, that Lagos is near the sea, and on the sea are the ships and the cannons of England, and you, Kosoko, do not hold the throne without any competitor for it. These responses would reach Beecroft in September 1851. While Beecroft was waiting for the response from his boss, word reached Kosoko of the request Akitoye had made to the British. It again emphasized to Kosoko that Oshoditakpa had made a grave error when he allowed Akitoye pass, when he could have executed the defeated king during their takeover of Lagos in the Battle of Saltwater that we discussed in the last episode. Majority of the native Badagry chiefs supported Kosoko at this time, even though Akitoye's party was large and had reinforced support from the Egba. In June 1851, fighting broke out in Badagry between the two sides, which was only put down when Egba reinforcements arrived to Akitoye's aid. Kosoko followed up with two different attacks on Badagry with his cannon-mounted war canoes, determined to eliminate the threat and competitor that Palmerston had referred to in his letter. The British responded by placing boats from the West African Squadron in the waterways between Badagry and Lagos, stopping the canoe attacks. Sensing the danger Akitoye was in, the missionary Saros alliance quickly acted to spur the British Foreign Office into action. Henry Venn arranged for Samuel Ajayi Crowther to tour England in August 1851. Crowther then argued before both Queen Victoria and Lord Palmerston that if Lagos was placed under Akitoye and allied with England in a treaty, British commercial interests would be guaranteed, and it would also lead to the end of the slave trade out of Lagos. On November 19th of 1851, Consul Beecroft arrived Lagos on the gunboat HMS Bloodhound with Akitoye on board. The next day, he went to meet Kosoko at the palace in the company of three other British officers, Commander Wilmot, Commander Gardner, and Lieutenant Pate, leaving Akitoye on the boat. Kosoko met them with Oshoditakpa, his powerful war commander, mirroring the less diplomatic atmosphere of this meeting. Beecroft communicated the contents of Palmerston's letter, and it is no surprise from the content of the letter that Kosoko must have interpreted this as the veiled threat that it was. The meeting ended abruptly, with Kosoko rejecting signing the British treaty. It was clear to both sides that Beecroft merely wanted to tick the box that he had offered Kosoko an opportunity to sign the treaty, without any real intention to negotiate the deal to avoid war. He wasted no time in meeting with the commander of the West African Squadron, Commander Forbes, and telling him, "I have used every available means to make a treaty with Kosoko without success. I have no alternative but to ask the Royal Navy for a sufficient force to compel him to make a treaty or dethrone him and replace him with the rightful heir, Akitoye. They hastily agreed to move on Lagos immediately. Oshoditakpa organized the defenses of Lagos and was very well informed on the movement of the British. At this point, we arrive back at the beginning of this series. 2 days later, on November 25th, 1851, Commander Forbes entered Lagos waters with the HMS Bloodhound and 21 other boats, hoping for a quick victory, only to be soundly defeated by Oshoditakpa and his 5,000 defenders. The link to this in the first episode and all the other episodes in this series are in the description, so you can watch them. 1 month later, on Boxing Day, a second British force came in with overwhelming firepower, reducing Lagos to a smoldering ruin while taking heavy losses. The war, which came to be known as Ogun Agidingbi, an onomatopic name meaning the boom boom battle, referring to the deafening sound the cannons from both sides made in the war, was the watershed for Lagos. Akitoye would realize too late that the scenario under Adele was different from the one he found himself in. The British did not just want to place him on the throne, they wanted control of Lagos. He signed the treaty the British wanted on New Year's Day of 1852. He will die 2 years later in 1853 without truly enjoying the sovereignty he had so longed for. His son Dosumu would succeed him, but would ultimately be forced to cede Lagos to the British as a colony in 1861, ending the independence of the Kingdom of Lagos and setting in motion the colonization of the area that would come to be known as Nigeria over the next 43 years. I hope you found this 6-part series on the history of the bombardment of Lagos interesting. For the next episode, we'll start a new series on the Fulani jihads in pre-colonial West Africa. You cannot afford to miss this new series, so please hit the subscribe button and turn your notifications on. Buy the books as well, and see you next time.